I never imagined that moving into my father's new house would feel like walking straight into a storm, pretending to be peace. When Dad told me he was remarrying, I tried to be supportive. He'd been lonely for years after Mom passed away, and part of me thought maybe, just maybe, this could be a new beginning for both of us. His new wife, Laura, seemed kind enough. She had a soft voice and a gentle smile, like she was always trying to make everyone feel comfortable. And then there was her son, Ethan. Ethan was around my age, maybe a year older, tall, clean-cut, polite to the point of perfection. He carried boxes for me when I moved in, offered to help set up my room, even made breakfast once. Everyone loved him right away. To my dad, he was the ideal stepson. To Laura, he was an angel. And for a while, I wanted to believe it too. I wanted to believe we could all be a family, but something about him didn't sit right with me. It wasn't anything I could explain, just a feeling. The way he smiled without warmth, the way his eyes followed me, as if he were studying me. It was subtle, but it was there, like a shadow you only notice when the light flickers. Still, I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe I was being too defensive, too protective of my space. New families take time, right? So I ignored it. For a few weeks, life felt normal. Family dinners, weekend breakfasts, movie nights. It almost felt peaceful. I started to let my guard down. And then one morning, everything shifted. My favorite necklace was gone. It was a small silver locket my mom gave me before she died. I wore it every day, never took it off, except the night before, when I placed it gently on my dresser before taking a shower. The next morning, it was missing. At first, I thought I'd misplaced it. I searched my room from top to bottom, every drawer, every corner, even under the bed. Nothing. I went through my laundry, checked the bathroom, my bag. Still nothing. Panic started rising in my chest. That necklace wasn't just jewelry. It was the last piece of my mother I had. I needed to find it. I finally asked Ethan if he'd seen it. He didn't even look up from his phone when he said, "Maybe you misplaced it. You're kinda messy." His tone wasn't teasing. It was sharp, smug, almost mocking. Messy. I wasn't messy. I was careful, especially with something that important. I felt my stomach twist. He knew exactly what that necklace meant to me. I could see it in his eyes when I asked him. The slight smirk that tugged at his lips. It wasn't innocence. It was satisfaction. But I said nothing. I just nodded and walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying his words, his face, that smirk. Around midnight, I got up to grab some water. As I passed Ethan's room, I heard laughter. I stopped. The door was slightly open, and I could hear him whispering to someone on the phone. His voice was low, but I caught the words. "She's so easy to mess with." The world seemed to go still. My heart dropped into my stomach. Was he talking about me? I wanted to push the door open, to confront him, to scream, but I couldn't move. My whole body felt frozen. I just stood there in the hallway, listening to him laugh softly, that same fake charm in his voice. I backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound. When I reached my room, I closed the door and pressed my back against it, my hands shaking. Maybe I misheard. Maybe he wasn't talking about me. But deep down, I knew the truth. That wasn't paranoia. That was the beginning. The calm before everything fell apart. I didn't know it yet. But that missing necklace was just the first move in a game I never agreed to play. And Ethan, he was only getting started. Over the next few weeks, strange little things started happening. Small enough to seem like coincidences, but frequent enough to make me question my sanity. My alarm clock would randomly stop working, even though the batteries were new. My laptop began acting weird, freezing, deleting random files, especially the ones I needed most. I'd stay up late finishing a school project, only to wake up and find it gone the next morning. It was like someone wanted to make me look careless, unreliable, stupid. At first, I tried to brush it off. Technology glitches, human error, bad luck, whatever. But then it started spreading beyond my room. Teachers who used to greet me with smiles suddenly became cold, distant. Friends started giving me strange looks, whispering behind my back. Something was changing, and I couldn't figure out what. Then came the day that confirmed everything. It was a Thursday morning. I was halfway through class when my teacher called me to her office. Her tone was clipped, formal, nothing like usual. When I walked in, she didn't even ask me to sit. She just turned her computer screen toward me. "Did you send this email?" she asked. My heart started pounding. On the screen was a message filled with sarcasm and insults, mocking her teaching, saying things I would never say to anyone, let alone her. And there it was, my name, my school email, my signature at the bottom. I didn't write that, I stammered. "I swear I didn't," she folded her arms, unimpressed. "It came from your account. Do you expect me to believe someone else did it?" I wanted to shout yes, because that's exactly what I believed. But how could I prove it? To her, I was just another student trying to avoid trouble. When I got home that day, Dad was waiting. He didn't yell, but his disappointment was louder than any shouting could have been. "You need to be more respectful," he said, his voice heavy. "Your teacher emailed me today. It felt like the floor fell out from under me." I tried to explain, to tell him I didn't do it, but he just sighed and said, "You've been distracted lately. Maybe you should focus on your behavior." I wanted to scream, to tear the walls down until someone finally believed me. But instead, I went upstairs, shut my door, and just stood there in silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was running in circles. If someone was behind this, it had to be Ethan. It had to be. But I needed proof. Something real. Something undeniable. Around midnight, I walked past his room. The door was slightly open, and the faint blue glow of his laptop lit the darkness. He wasn't there, but the screen was still on. Curiosity, or maybe desperation, pulled me closer. On the desktop, I saw a folder labeled Fun Projects. My chest tightened. Ethan was not the kind of person who did fun projects. I hesitated for a second, then leaned in to look. What I saw made my stomach twist. Inside that folder were dozens of screenshots of my social media, my messages, even my school emails. Every private thing I'd ever written was sitting right there, copied, catalogued, saved. My heart started hammering so fast, I could barely breathe. He had access to everything. Every word, every photo, every file. That's when the truth hit me like a punch to the chest. It was him. It had been him all along. He was behind every accident, every whisper, every judgmental look. He was quietly, methodically destroying me. I backed away from his door, trying not to make a sound. My hands were trembling so badly, I could barely turn my doorknob. Once inside my room, I locked the door and sank to the floor. I finally knew the truth, but knowing wasn't enough. I couldn't just tell people he was doing this. He'd deny it, twist it, make me look crazy. I needed proof. Solid, undeniable proof. So that night, as the house slept, I made a promise to myself. I would find a way to expose him. I didn't know how yet, but I wasn't going to let him destroy me quietly. Not anymore. Ethan was the golden boy, the kind of person everyone admired without question. Straight A student, captain of his debate team, the kind of son teachers praised and neighbors adored. He had a way of making people feel like he was always doing the right thing, saying the right words, being exactly who they wanted him to be. To my dad and his mum, he was perfect, polite, hardworking, dependable. He volunteered at community events, helped old neighbors carry their groceries, and always had that camera-ready smile in every family photo. If you looked at our pictures, you'd think we were the happiest blended family alive. But what no one saw was the shadow behind that smile. The quiet malice, hiding just beneath his perfect act. While everyone saw Ethan as a dream son, I began to see the truth. Behind closed doors, he was deliberate, calculated. Every move was part of a performance, and I was the target of his script. He wasn't content with me just existing beside him. He wanted to make sure I never fit in. It started small, subtle things that didn't seem like much on their own. If I came home a little late from school, he'd casually mention it to Dad over dinner. "Oh, she was out pretty late today," he'd say, pretending not to care. Then he'd smirk, just slightly, like he'd planted a seed and was waiting for it to grow. Or, if I forgot to do a small chore, like leaving a dish in the sink, he'd joke about it in front of my stepmother. "Guess she's too busy for housework," he'd say, with that charming laugh that made her smile. And me grit my teeth, and when I made a real mistake, something as small as forgetting an assignment or spilling a drink, he made sure everyone heard about it. His timing was perfect, his tone innocent, like he wasn't trying to get me in trouble. But he always did. He was building something, a version of me that didn't exist. Careless, irresponsible, disrespectful. The more he said it, the more people started to believe it. My dad began to look at me differently. Less warmth in his eyes, more disappointment. His voice, once patient, now carried irritation. "You need to be more organized," he'd say. "Ethan manages his time so well, why can't you?" Those words cut deeper than he realized, because every time he compared me to Ethan, I could feel Ethan watching from the corner of his eye, silently proud of his performance. Even Laura, my stepmother, who used to treat me with cautious kindness, slowly shifted to his side. If I tried to explain something, she'd dismiss me with a smile. "Honey, Ethan didn't mean it like that," she'd say. "You're overreacting, overreacting." That became their favorite word whenever I tried to defend myself. Ethan had turned my own house into his stage, and everyone else had become his audience. Every day felt like a scene in his perfectly rehearsed show. The charming stepson, the rebellious stepdaughter, the loving but oblivious parents. And no matter what I did, I was always cast as the villain. But what he didn't realize was that I was done playing my part. The hurt, the frustration, the anger, they'd been simmering quietly inside me, waiting for the right moment. And that moment was coming. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had something stronger. Determination. Ethan had built a perfect image for the world, but I had seen the cracks, and I was going to tear them wide open. He thought I was weak because I stayed quiet, but what he didn't know was that silence can be the sharpest weapon of all, especially when it's waiting for the right time to strike. I realized suspicion wasn't enough. Whispers and gut feelings wouldn't topple someone who knew how to lie perfectly. I needed proof, cold, undeniable proof, that would show exactly what he'd done and who he was when no one else was watching. So I started to watch him, not in a dramatic movie way. Quietly, carefully, like a student taking notes, I paid attention to his routines, the little rhythms of his day. He stayed up late most nights, always locking his door afterward. He'd say he was studying, which everyone accepted without question. But the secrecy felt different from private work. It felt calculated. One afternoon, Ethan told Dad he was meeting friends at the library. He kissed Laura on the cheek, smiled at me, then walked out the front door. I watched him go and felt something in me shift from fear to action. I waited until the driveway was empty, then slipped up the stairs, palms sweating, heart thudding like a drum. His room looked like a showroom. Everything in place, surfaces shining. It was almost too clean. I moved slowly, listening for any sound, searching for anything that might hint at the truth. The floorboard by the closet creaked under my weight, and for a second I froze, expecting someone to burst in. Nothing, just the house breathing quietly. Then I noticed the drawer. It was barely open, the only thing out of line. I slid a finger along the edge and pulled it gently. Inside, beneath a stack of blank notebooks, sat a small external hard drive. My breath hitched. I slid it into my bag like it weighed 10 pounds, every movement shaky and ridiculous. My hands felt unreal, as if the gravity of what I was about to do hadn't quite settled into my bones yet. Back in my room, I locked the door and plugged the drive into my laptop. I clicked through the folders with a kind of terrified curiosity, like someone watching a car crash from the safety of the sidewalk. The first folder was labeled with his usual joke name, the second, then the third. Open to reveal aftershock after aftershock. Screenshots of private messages, copies of social media accounts, edited images, snippets of conversations, all catalogued, dated, and labeled. My skin crawled as I scrolled. There were folders for classmates, teachers, even a few neighborhood people. In one folder, messages twisted together to look like fights that never happened. In another, videos he'd edited to make people appear drunk or rude. He hadn't just been mean. He'd been meticulous. He crafted stories the way some people craft essays, carefully piecing fragments into something believable. Then I saw it. A folder named with my name. My fingers stopped moving. My chest tightened so hard I felt dizzy. Inside were dozens of files. Fake screenshots of conversations I never had. Photos cropped and captioned with things I never said. Emails with my signature forged and time-stamped at odd hours. He'd built a dossier meant to annihilate me. Anger rose up slow and heavy, a physical thing pressing against my ribs. I could feel every lie he'd planted take shape in front of me. Every nasty email and snide comment explained like pieces of an ugly puzzle. He hadn't been careless. He'd been strategic. He wanted me erased. But under the anger, something else shifted. The knot of fear in my throat loosened and sharpened into something clear, resolve. For so long I'd been reacting, apologizing, explaining, shrinking myself so the house would stay calm. This time I didn't want to beg for belief. I wanted to build a case. I wanted to turn his own web against him. I copied everything. Every folder, every screenshot, every manipulated file. I backed them up in 3 places. My hands moved faster now, steady with purpose. Each click felt like a small recovery, like reclaiming a piece of myself. The evidence was ugly and damning, but it was truth. When I finally shut the laptop, the room felt both bigger and smaller at once. The silence was heavy, but no longer frightening. I wasn't just a target anymore. I had proof. I had a choice. And whatever came next, I knew I wouldn't be silent. I knew I couldn't walk into the living room and point at him. If I did, he'd put on that innocent face, the same one that made Dad proud, and he'd cry, twist the truth, and Dad would believe him every time. He'd spin it like I was the one out of line, and the whole house would turn on me faster than I could breathe. So I made a different decision. If he wanted to play games with people's lives, I would learn how to play by his rules. But with one difference, I planned to win honestly. First, I became obsessed with proof. Not rumors, not feelings, paperwork. I copied every file from the hard drive, saved every screenshot, downloaded every fake profile I could find. I learned how to make exact digital mirrors of his folders, so nothing could disappear later. I labeled everything, dated everything, and hid backups in places he would never think to look. Paranoia became my ally. I backed up the backups. Then came the mask. If he could pretend to be someone else online, I could too. I created a fake student account, a new profile that looked harmless, curious, maybe a little lost. I wrote a short bio, picked a photo that wasn't mine, but wasn't suspicious, and started small. Likes, comments, friendly messages to a few school accounts. Nothing over the top. I wanted to be believable, not flashy. It didn't take long for him to notice. He loved attention. He loved control. When someone new sniffed around his little empire, he smiled and invited them in. Using my fake account, I reached out to one of the same aliases he used for his projects. I acted intrigued, asked the right dumb questions, and waited for him to respond. He did. Fast. First, he bragged about how easy it was to manipulate people. Then he showed me examples. Edited screenshots, fake conversations, accounts he'd crafted to ruin a test grade or start a rumor. He explained his methods like a teacher showing off a skill. He typed things like, "With a few edits and the right timestamp, people believe anything." Every boast was a confession I captured. I recorded everything, not just saved messages, but audio of him talking when he thought no one else was listening, screen recordings of him logging into alt accounts, and time-stamped files that proved ownership. I learned how to trap his arrogance, baiting him with praise so he would explain process and motive. He loved showing off. I loved that he did. Over the next 2 weeks, I played the patient game. He let me into the inner circle of his fake world. He showed me the accounts he used, the emails he forged, the videos he'd clipped and spliced to create drama. He bragged about the people he'd fixed and the reputations he'd handled. Each brag was another brick in the case I was building. I was careful though. Every interaction was methodical. I never pushed him too hard, never asked anything that would trigger suspicion. I wrote everything down, exported conversations, recorded timestamps. I kept calm when my stomach wanted to twist into knots. I slept less, worked faster, and kept my face steady around Dad and Laura so nothing would blow my cover. By the end of the second week, I had enough. Enough to show a pattern, to prove intent, to demonstrate he wasn't just a prankster. He was a manipulator who built lives out of lies. I had messages where he admitted ownership, screenshots tied to the fake accounts, and video clips of him explaining how he'd framed people. Most importantly, I had copies stored where he could never erase them. For the first time since the necklace disappeared, I felt a strange, fierce steadiness. This wasn't about spite anymore. It was about justice. Not violent, but final. I had what I needed to expose him, to dismantle the perfect image he'd built brick by brick. I was ready to turn the lights on in his dark little theater. The plan was set. All that was left was to pull the curtain. The night before my plan unfolded, I barely slept. My body trembled, not from fear, but from the pressure of knowing what was about to happen. My hands felt ice cold against the glow of my laptop, yet my heart burned hot with determination. Every file, every message, every word he'd used to tear people down was now organized in neat, undeniable folders. For weeks, I had lived in silence, letting him believe he was untouchable. But that night, the silence had an expiration date. By dawn, I was up, earlier than usual, nerves slicing through me like static. I packed my bag, double-checked the USB drive, and took one last look at the evidence before heading to school. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. Cold, unfiltered truth that even Ethan couldn't escape. When I reached school, the hallways were nearly empty. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before I sent the email. It was anonymous. No trace leading back to me. The message was short, professional, and sharp. Please review the attached evidence regarding ongoing harassment, identity manipulation, and cyberbullying activities by a student named Ethan M. Attached were folders of screenshots, fake accounts, confessions, and the video file that showed Ethan in his own words, explaining how he controlled stories and ruined reputations for fun. Then, I hit send. The next few hours moved in slow motion. Classes dragged on, each minute louder in my chest than the last. But by lunchtime, the whispers began. First quiet, like passing wind. then growing into ripples that moved from table to table, person to person. Did you hear about Ethan? Someone leaked something. They say he's been blackmailing people. By the time I walked into the hallway, the air was heavy with murmurs and side glances. Ethan strolled in like he always did, confident, charming, until he noticed the silence following him. He looked around confused at first, then the stares met him head-on. Phones tilted in his direction, screens lit up, the name Ethan flashing across gossip threads, screenshots spreading like wildfire. I watched his face shift, from confusion to recognition to fear. His smile broke, piece by piece, until nothing was left but the raw panic underneath. The golden boy mask was cracking, and for once, everyone could see what lived behind it. By the end of the day, the school board had already summoned him. Teachers avoided eye contact. His friends kept their distance, and when he left the building, his usual swagger was gone, replaced by a hollow, stumbling silence. At home, the chaos was immediate. I could hear voices before I even reached the door. My dad pacing, his tone sharp and cold. My stepmother's muffled sobs echoing through the walls. And Ethan, sitting at the dining table, pale, trembling, his eyes red but dry, like he couldn't even process what was happening. "Ethan," my dad said, voice low and steady. "What is this I'm hearing?" Ethan tried to speak, but his words crumbled before they reached his lips. It's not true," he stammered. "Someone set me up. It's fake." That was my cue. I stepped forward, calm, collected, not angry anymore, just done. "I think you should check this," I said, placing the USB drive on the table between us. For a long moment, no one spoke. My dad looked from me to Ethan, confusion turning to dread. He plugged the drive into his laptop. The screen lit up with the files, the videos, the messages. Ethan's voice echoing through the speakers, boasting about how he fooled everyone, how easy it was to make people believe what he wanted. The silence that followed was suffocating. My stepmother covered her mouth, tears spilling. Ethan just stared at the floor, broken. And my dad, the man who had always defended him, looked completely shattered. His jaw clenched, eyes dim with disappointment that cut deeper than any punishment could. That was the moment I realized I didn't need to yell, didn't need to celebrate. His world had collapsed under the weight of his own lies. The truth had spoken louder than revenge ever could. Within a single day, everything Ethan had built for himself, the charm, the reputation, the admiration, came crashing down like a tower made of glass. The same people who once praised him now whispered his name with disgust. Teachers who smiled at him in the hallways avoided his gaze. His friends unfollowed him, blocked his number, erased him from group chats as if he had never existed. The golden boy was gone, replaced by a ghost. The school's decision came fast and public, suspended indefinitely pending investigation. His perfect record shattered overnight. The administration confiscated his laptop, reviewed the evidence, and called in parents. There was no debate left to have. The proof was too loud, too complete. At home, the silence was heavier than shouting. He moved through rooms like a shadow, eyes low, shoulders caved in. He couldn't meet my gaze. The smug smirk that once lived permanently on his face had vanished. Every sound, a phone ringing, a door closing, made him flinch. His mother tried to argue with Dad at first. "He's just a kid. He made mistakes," she cried. But even she couldn't hold on to that lie for long. The more she saw, the more she understood. There was no misunderstanding, no manipulation. Ethan had chosen this path. He wasn't framed. He was exposed. The air in the house changed. The same walls that once echoed with his fake laughter now felt colder. Meals were quiet. The TV stayed off. Everyone moved like they were waiting for something to break. Then, late one night, there was a knock on my door, soft, hesitant. I already knew who it was. I opened it, and there he stood. Not the confident, smirking boy I met months ago, but someone smaller, deflated. His eyes were red, his voice barely a whisper. I just wanted to say, "I'm sorry." For a moment, I just looked at him. I thought I'd feel anger, maybe satisfaction, but all I felt was exhaustion. The kind that settles deep in your bones after too much pain. "Sorry doesn't undo what you did," I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. "You didn't just ruin my image, Ethan. You tried to ruin me." He nodded, staring at the floor. His mouth opened as if he wanted to defend himself, to find a reason, a justification. But for once he didn't. He had nothing left to say, no lies, no stories, no charm to hide behind. That silence, the one that filled the space between us, was the most honest thing he had ever given me. And in that silence, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Months slipped by, quietly but steadily, like the world was finally exhaling after holding its breath for too long. The chaos that once filled my days, the whispers, the glares, the tension, began to fade into the background. Life didn't snap back to normal overnight, but piece by piece, I started reclaiming what Ethan had tried to take from me. At school, people who once avoided me began to approach with hesitant smiles. A few even apologized, awkwardly, quietly, saying they were sorry for believing the lies. I didn't hate them for it anymore. I had learned that people see what they want to see, and sometimes truth needs time to fight its way through the noise. My teachers treated me differently too. Not with pity, but with respect. My grades climbed back up. I started joining things again, talking to people again. It felt strange at first, rebuilding a life that had been dismantled, but it also felt right. It was mine again. At home the shift was slower, but it was real. My dad finally looked at me the way he used to, with warmth, not suspicion. One night, he sat beside me on the porch, the air cool and quiet, and said, "I should have trusted you more." His voice cracked a little when he said it. I didn't need a big apology. That one sentence was enough. It was closure. Ethan, meanwhile, wasn't the same person anymore. After the school board's decision, he was required to attend therapy. They said he needed to confront the impact of his behavior, to understand the damage he caused. I didn't keep track of him, but sometimes I'd hear his mother mention he was working on himself. I didn't wish him harm. I didn't want revenge anymore. Not really. I just wanted peace. And for the first time in months, I finally had it. The house that once felt like a battlefield slowly softened. The shouting stopped. The tension lifted. Dinner conversations became lighter. There were still scars, quiet ones, but they didn't hurt like before. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the walls gold, I sat by my window, letting the warmth soak in. My eyes caught something glinting on my dresser, the silver locket, the one my mom had given me. I'd found it weeks earlier, tucked beneath the bottom drawer of Ethan's old desk, almost hidden from sight. When I held it, I felt this strange, quiet strength hum through me. That small piece of metal had been lost, buried, forgotten. And yet, it survived, just like me. I clasped it around my neck, whispering softly, "I'm okay now." And for the first time in a long, long while, I truly meant it. Sometimes, the deepest cuts don't come from enemies. They come from the people who smile at you across the dinner table, who call you family, who pretend their care is genuine while planting seeds of doubt behind your back. That's the kind of betrayal that breaks something inside you. Not because of the lies themselves, but because of who told them. For a long time, I thought revenge meant destruction. That to get even, you had to cause the same pain you felt. But I was wrong. Real revenge isn't about ruining someone else. It's about reclaiming yourself. It's about standing tall when they expect you to crumble, about showing the truth so clearly that their lies can't breathe anymore. Ethan built his entire world on manipulation. He believed he could twist narratives, rewrite people's reputations, and control how others were seen. But the truth has a way of catching up. And when it did, it didn't just expose him, it defined him. The story he wrote for others became the story that ended him. And me? I learned something I'll never forget. That silence can be powerful when used wisely. It doesn't mean weakness. It means waiting for the right moment. Because when truth finally speaks, it doesn't need to shout. It simply stands there, undeniable. So if someone ever tries to destroy your name, don't rush to scream or strike back. Let them talk. Let them spin their web and quietly collect the truth. Then, when the time is right, let it all unfold. Don't fight with anger. Fight with proof. Fight with patience. Because when the truth finally surfaces, it becomes the loudest revenge of all.